Okay, the assignment for today was to do the questions on page 92. Let's go over those. Check your paper, and I will take a grade from this. Number one, what responsibility did the publicans have in Roman society? No?
To collect taxes.
Right, that's pretty much it. If you have more than that, that's more than you needed. Collecting taxes, yeah.
I wasn't here because
Okay.
I was sick. So
Okay, you need to go out in the hall and work on this while we're going over. All right, number two. Let's see, John, what were the names of the two brothers who became spokesmen for reform in the later days of the Republic?
Tiberius and
Gaius,
Gaius.
Gracchus. Right, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. We'll give you 2 points for having each one of those guys. Number three, who were the two generals who fought in the First Civil War? Griff, we'll start with that one.
The two generals that fought us were Marius and Sulla.
Correct. And then the next question is, which had the backing of the Senate and which had the backing of the tribal assembly?
Wait. Which part is it?
Griff? Uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't get that one.
Didn't answer that part?
But I think Senate is Sulla, right?
Right?
And Marius is the other one.
Right. Sulla is the Senate, Marius the tribal assembly. We'll give you, I guess we could make it 4 points on that one. The two generals and who they identified with. All right, number four. Stephen, who were the three rulers of the triumvirate?
Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar.
Right. 3 points for those three. And number five, in what battle and year did Octavian defeat Antony in the Third Civil War? Zach?
The Battle of Actium. I didn't have the year.
The Battle of Actium is correct. What year was it, Amelia? Oh, are we not reading the complete question? Noah?
31 BC.
31 BC is correct. That's 2 points. One for the battle, one for the year. So there are 12 points all together. Count up how many points you missed. Put it at the top of the page and circle it. And then I will collect it. Yesterday we were looking at how Julius Caesar had become a hero by being a great military leader in what area? What? Where did Caesar win many battles? What area was he governor?
Oh, Gaul.
Yeah, right there, Gaul. And what did it mean when he crossed the Rubicon River?
They were like engaging in war.
With whom was he engaging?
Pompey.
Pompey. And Pompey represented what group of people?
The Senate.
The Senate, right. Okay, good. So we saw him coming in. Let's see. Did we do? I don't think we did that yet, did we? The reforms, no. So I don't have any slides for the next part where Caesar fought against Pompey. Pompey fled. Where did Pompey go?
Egypt.
Egypt. And what happened to him there? He was killed. So then Caesar was pursuing Pompey to Egypt before he knew of his death. He got there, and he found that there was a civil war taking place in Egypt between a brother and a sister. One's name was Ptolemy, descendant of the original Ptolemy, and his sister's name was Cleopatra. All right. Caesar ended up tried to get them both to work it out. He really wanted there not to be one or the other, but the brother Let's see, I can't remember now. Did he die? No, I can't. I can't remember if he died or whether he just lost favor with Caesar. I know Caesar was doing didn't. Well, the brother wasn't happy with the arrangement that Caesar was coming up with, and so I think he just basically left, and he is planning on maybe fighting this whole thing. Meanwhile, Cleopatra took Caesar on a whirlwind tour of Egypt, saw everything, and they became very friendly on the tour. So friendly that she ended up giving birth to his child, whom she named Caesarion, Little Caesar. Now, Caesar would have been viewed by the people of Egypt as Cleopatra's consort. You know, if you're a king or queen, you can have, you know, really good friends that that you have sexual relations with. But the problem is Caesar had a wife whose name was Calpurnia back in Rome. Well, Caesar went back to Rome. And when he got to Rome, he sent for Cleopatra and Caesarion. Well, the Roman people were outraged at this. This was an insult to Caesar's wife and to the Romans that he would bring this Egyptian, this Greek Egyptian woman to Rome. Caesar then set Cleopatra up in a villa just outside of Rome. We aggravated the situation even further by placing a statue of Cleopatra dressed as the goddess Isis in a Roman temple. He's really elevating her. I mean, he's not trying to keep it a secret he's having an affair with this woman. He is bringing her right there in full view and elevating her to the place of a goddess. Well, the Roman Senate became concerned that if Caesar was doing that to Cleopatra, that maybe really what Caesar wanted to do was himself rule Rome as a god. Well, the result was that Caesar had gained enough power that he had himself declared dictator, not for 6 months, but for life. And he accomplished many reforms, which include these. First, he curbed the corruption of the provincial governments. Those governments that were out in the territories that Rome had conquered had become just like Rome, very corrupt. And he did away with much of that. Next, he established colonies for the landless army veterans. You know, the problem is, as you may remember, that when men came home from the army, if they had a farm, oftentimes they lost it, couldn't pay the taxes, whatever. And so Caesar wanted to make sure that army veterans had a place to live. And so he established certain colonies in different places for them. One of those colonies is a place that you should be familiar with, and that is the city of Philippi. Remember Philippi? That was a Roman colony, populated in large part with veteran Roman soldiers. Thirdly, he granted citizenship to many non-Italians living in Rome's new colonies. So the different places where Rome had expanded, Caesar granted citizenship to many of the people living there, and in particular the Gauls. Remember, he had served in Gaul for some time, and he knew the people there. He knew the leaders. They had been on his side, and so he granted them Roman citizenship. Next, he initiated many public work programs. That is, building things for the public use. You know, anything from latrines, restroom type areas, to bathhouses, to theaters, aqueducts, and things that would help the public. Next, he established the calendar. That is the basis of our 365 and a fourth day year. Most cultures had used a lunar calendar based on the moon. He established the calendar that we the type of calendar of what we use today. Not the exact calendar we use, but it's similar. Next, he gave full citizenship for Romans whose rights had been denied under Sulla. So he's gaining more people on his side. So people that had their citizenship taken away by Sulla, he restored. Next, he abolished the trade and social guilds because they were hotbeds of conspiracy. That would be like the equivalent today of trade unions or organizations of people that all make the same thing, and they would band together and oftentimes set whatever prices they would have, so there wouldn't be any competition between them. They would set the price, so wherever you went, buy shoes, it was the same price at all of them. They also became organizations where they were like clubs that people came to complain about things and sometimes organize protests, things like that. And so he didn't want any of these conspiracy organizations gaining more and more momentum, and so he outlawed them. Next, he required that plantation labor forces be at least 1/3 freemen. Because of many slaves that were being brought into Rome due to their victories over many different peoples, slavery became a very important means of production. But what that was doing was throwing the common person out of work, because it was cheaper to buy a slave than it was to pay somebody to do the work. Well, his solution was that he limited the plantations to only 2/3 slaves, 1/3 freemen. And then the ninth reform was the limitation of 2-year terms of governors of the provinces and of 1 year for praetorians. So what had happened is that if a person was a governor of one of the territories, one of the provinces, if he was there for a long time, he accumulates more and more wealth, he's more and more entrenched, and more and more corruption. So Caesar says, we're going to put it on a rotation. 2 years and you're out, somebody else comes in. That prevented them from gaining too much influence and participating in too much corruption. All right, so those are some of the reforms, some of the good reforms, ones that the people certainly would have liked that Caesar brought into Rome due to his dictatorship. All right, do you have any questions about any of those reforms? Well, Caesar does not prove to be popular with everyone. As I said, there were many in the Senate that thought that he was setting the stage for himself to be a god, that he would rule over Rome as a god. And so there were those that felt that he was accumulating too much power. And so there was a conspiracy among some of the senators to assassinate him. And this brings about a third civil war. Here's a painting of the assassination of Julius Caesar, probably made most famous by the play written by William Shakespeare called Julius Caesar. A very good play, very interesting. Gives us a lot of information, accurate information, I think, about what transpired. And so we know that this group of senators attacked Caesar as he was on his way into the Senate, and many of them stabbed him, causing his death, including his good friend Brutus, which was caused Caesar to say the famous line, "Et tu, Brute? You also, Brutus? Surprise, you're my friend, and you're stabbing me too?" Well, excuse me, that brings about a civil war as Caesar is assassinated by this group of conspirators. As a result, Caesar's friend Mark Antony teamed together with Caesar's nephew Octavius, who also was the heir to the throne. He was adopted by Caesar to be his heir. And the two of them pursued the murderers of Caesar, who were Cassius and Brutus in particular. At this time, Cleopatra, now that Julius Caesar is gone, knows that she is not in a good position because the people of Rome hate her. So she flees back to Egypt. All right, so you got the scenario here. The cause of the Third Civil War is that Caesar is assassinated. Mark Antony, the friend of Caesar, and Octavian, the nephew and heir of Julius Caesar, band together to go after the conspirators who assassinated Julius Caesar. After Julius Caesar's death, Mark Antony became very well respected and became really the master of Rome. Octavian, although he had been named by Caesar as his heir, had very little power. Mark Antony had the experience. Mark Antony had the support of the people. Cicero campaigned for Octavian, however, and in 43 BC, Octavian was elected consul. Octavian then raised an army and marched against Mark Antony. But instead of fighting, the men came to an understanding. Together with Lepidus, a prominent politician and general, they formed the Second Triumvirate. So the Second Triumvirate is made up of Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Each agreed to have certain people killed so that they could maintain their power. Among those killed was Cicero. In all, around 300 senators and 200 other leaders were put to death. After the death of Cassius and Brutus, the conspirators in the assassination of Julius Caesar, the Second Triumvirate divided Rome's vast territories, with Octavian ruling the west, Lepidus ruling in Africa, Mark Antony ruling the east. Cleopatra hosted a sumptuous banquet at Tarsus, where she and Antony met. So she travels up, she's trying to make an impression on Antony now, because she knows she needs the support of Rome. Julius Caesar's gone, she sees Antony as maybe the next one that's going to come to power. So she meets him up here in the city where the Apostle Paul was born and raised. Just to show Antony how wealthy she was, she gave her guests furniture and gold dinnerware as party favors. You ever gone to a party where you receive gifts? Sometimes birthday parties are like that now. Well, she gave gifts to all of her guests. Furniture. Can you imagine going to a party and getting furniture as a gift? Or gold dinnerware. Wow. That would show that you're pretty wealthy. Antony was impressed, and he returned to Alexandria with Cleopatra. Well, they became very friendly too. She became pregnant with twins. She named them Alexander Helios, the sun, and Cleopatra Selene, the moon. So Alexander the sun, Cleopatra the moon. Antony then returned to Rome, and in order to solidify his relationship with Octavian, married Octavian's sister, whose name was Octavia. You can see how you get those names mixed up. Octavian's sister was named Octavia. And Mark Antony marries her after he's already had twins with Cleopatra. Now, how do you suppose Cleopatra felt when she heard that Mark Antony went back to Rome and married somebody else? Imagine that was pretty infuriating. Well, soon Lepidus, who had control of Africa only, was ousted, and that left only Antony and Octavian to rule. Well, the marriage of Antony to Octavian's sister Octavia was supposed to solidify the ruling arrangement between Octavian and Mark Antony. However, a short time later, Antony decided to divorce Octavia and marry Cleopatra. Well, Octavian was enraged about that. Antony's divorcing his sister. And he read to the Senate a document which he said was Mark Antony's will. And in this will, supposedly, Mark Antony left the city of Rome in his will to Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, and her children, which would include his children. In reality, Antony had already given away the areas of Armenia, Pontus, Libya, Phoenicia, and northern Syria to Cleopatra's children. But according to Octavian, he was going to give Cleopatra Rome. Infuriated, the Senate ordered Octavian to march against Mark Antony, and the two met in battle at Actium. In Greece. The Battle of Actium took place in 31 BC off the western coast of Greece, where the navies of Antony and Cleopatra met the navy of Octavian. When it became apparent that Octavian was gaining the advantage, Cleopatra bugged out of there with her Egyptian forces. Well, she had a distinctive purple sail on her ship, and when Antony saw her ship leaving, he realized he wasn't going to be able to win the battle without her, and so he took off also. Well, the following year, here's a picture of the battle someone has drawn. Sea battle. The following year, Antony and Cleopatra were pursued into Egypt by Octavian, and eventually he caught up with them. And Cleopatra was barricaded in her palace. She sent word to Antony that she planned to commit suicide. When Antony heard this, he ran himself on his sword and was brought to Cleopatra and died in her arms. Octavian captured Cleopatra, intending to bring her back to Rome for his triumph and to parade her in chains. Cleopatra cheated Octavian, however, by arranging with one of her servants to bring in, among the food items, that there would be placed a poisonous asp, a snake, and she killed herself with the bite of this type of cobra, who was the traditional protector of Egypt. The results. Upon the deaths of Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian went to Egypt to subdue it. After success there, he returned to Rome in triumph, having become the ruler of the world at age 31. Not too shabby. A little older than Alexander the Great, and with a lot less effort really on his part than Alexander the Great, but still as a young man to become ruler of the known world. He did three things that won him the love of the people. Excuse me. One, he used the tribute from Egypt to buy land for army veterans. Notice how important it is to keep the army veterans happy? Julius Caesar and now his nephew, Octavian, are doing what they can, because what happens? If the army veterans get unhappy, and there's a lot of them that are unhappy, what is likely to occur? Well, they're already retired, so they're not going to be out there serving in the army anyway, but what might they do? If they're being mistreated, what might they do?
Spread the word how like corrupt he is.
And then what?
Bad name.
And then what? Just call them names?
His reputation.
What might they do? What might they do?
Revolt.
Not just say. Yeah, they might get together and revolt, right? They're the ones that know how to fight. So you want to keep them happy, at any rate. Secondly, he forgave everyone who owed back taxes. Woohoo! Would that make everybody happy? Don't have to pay your back taxes. And then thirdly, he granted amnesty to all of Antony's followers. So rather than going around killing everybody who was a follower of Mark Antony, he gave them amnesty. He forgave them, basically. So now those people are glad that Octavian has forgiven them. Octavian's not going to kill them, and so they are becoming followers of Octavian themselves. All right, any questions about what happens in this third civil war? All right, the conclusion. With the advent of Octavian into the place of sole ruler over the Roman expanse, Rome concluded the transition from a republic ruled by representatives of the people to an empire ruled by an imperator. These emperors would rule with supreme power for nearly 500 years. And after this, now we make the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. Which would be characterized by Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, the great architecture of Rome, which is largely copied from the Greeks, flourishing trade because Rome would get rid of piracy. Pompey already had done that. Well-governed provinces, as Caesar had rid them of the corruption that was there, and prosperous peasants, and especially as army veterans are given land, as people can work the land, as slavery has been reduced on the plantations at least to no more than 2/3. Any questions about the Roman Republic? Interesting that the end of the Republic comes through the strengthening of the Republic, really, the strengthening of Rome. As the result of the Third Civil War, Rome is stronger, having gone through these 3 civil wars. But one person has emerged as the leader. One person has become the most powerful one in Rome. And we're going to see him gain more and more power and more accolades to himself when we get into the next chapter, when we look at the Roman Empire. For tomorrow, I want you to do the chapter review on page 93. We will go over that. We will review the chapter, and then on Thursday, we will have a test over chapter 3, the Roman Republic.